this is a kind of sensitive topic, and I want to tell you how I got here. It's kind of weird. It also is tied into genealogy because the puppeteer is my second cousin. And the rabbi, he's related to the rabbi. And, all I knew was from around the dinner table. And we all knew growing up that we sat around the dinner table, they always told stories, the family stories, right? And many of them were told. And oh, did you hear the time your Aunt Martha got run over by, we know that. And this is what started it. My mother had told me when I was a kid that her aunt, Tante in German, Tante Magdalena, had married a Jew. That's all I knew. And she had two boys. And one of them went to Israel, became a puppeteer. The other one, I think, is still in somewhere. He's well gone now, but the relatives are still in the Czech Republic. So let me tell you the story of the rabbi and the puppeteer, and I'll try to connect the two men up at the end, because they are connected philosophically, and also we do not know, but all the I grew up in a Holocaust neighborhood where I think where everybody in my class in 1947 was Jewish. It never came up. It was never a problem. And, I guess it's something I said. That's a good choice. Don't have mine in. You know how it is. Anyway, I grew up in a Holocaust neighborhood in Inwood in Manhattan.
You grew up in what?
A Holocaust neighborhood in Inwood. You can read it on the screen. I put it up there for you, but just give me a minute. So let's start with the rabbi and the puppeteer. We're going to start with the rabbi. His name is Rabbi Leo Baeck, B-A-E-C-K. And he was a theologian ending up in Berlin. Let's take a look at his life. He's very, very famous. He's been in New York, spoke at Temple Emmanuel. He's been out at Cincinnati. And this is after.
Is he on the stamp?
Sorry.
Is that his picture on the stamp?
Yes. Yes, it is. He's quite well known. The problem is with Leo Baeck, he's a Reformed Jew. And he started Reformed Judaism, which meant women could be rabbis, which meant that women could have a bas mitzvah, and that women could sit with the men. I've been to an Orthodox service, and they took Thea's purse away and sat her upstairs because they don't mix. But anyway, let's look at him, otherwise I'll be here all night. He had a university education, and I put some of his quotes there to give people a home of their own. A home on this earth was his Israeli statement, but he was university educated, and the only thing was that he felt he was a German first and a Jew second. The Zionists felt they were a Jew first and whatever nationality second, and they really clashed. He was educated. I'm still going to use this microphone. So he was, they say, a mixture of both philosophies. He was also a very well-known theologian. This is where he lived. He was born in Charlottenburg, not in Charlottenburg. This is where he ended up. This is the Jewish quarter in Berlin before the war, the place where they were all limited. But let's go back a little further. Leo Baeck was born 1873 in Germany, which is now Poland. He was educated in Breslau. Go through his education. You can look it up. There's lots of books. In 1897, he was ordained as a rabbi, Schule for the Wissenschaft of Judaism in Berlin. He married his beloved Natalie Hamburger and he was drafted as a chaplain into World War I. There are some pictures of him. He wrote before the war, again, The Essence of Judaism, which is a very famous book. And everything was going well. 1905, he'd been a rabbi. In World War I, you see him with a cross on his arm because he's a man of the cloth. Now what happened? In 1897, he was a rabbi in Oakland and Düsseldorf. Finally, in 1912, he ends up in Berlin, where he remained for more than 30 years. After serving as a chaplain, he became the president of B'nai B'rith. In 1933, the Nazis seized power. He worked very hard and tried to work with the Nazis to see if we could work something out where we would stay separate. But he was also the president of what that translates representation of Jews in Germany. In 1943, he was deported to Theresienstadt concentration camp, where he is named the honorary president of the Council of Elders. This is Leo Baeck as the men are being transported to Theresienstadt. An interesting story, too. And this is the first time I've done this presentation, these slides. So if I slip here or there, please forgive me. Theresienstadt was actually a village. It was Terezin in Czechoslovakia. And what the Nazis did is they cleaned all the people who lived there out, just deported them, get lost, Germans, not particularly Jewish, and turned it into a concentration camp, the model concentration camp. Now we understand that there was Auschwitz and Dachau, Bergen-Belsen, we hear Mauthausen, we hear about them, not realizing there were 450 camps spread across the country. And they got rid of most of them, the ones that remained, but the ones that we know. See what I did. There we go. This is when Baeck was in this concentration camp, he was given 2 rooms, all his clothing, because this was the model concentration camp. They wanted to make, if anybody came to look at it, and some did, they would say how wonderful and happy the Jewish people are. Well, that did not last because the president of Denmark wanted to see the Danish Jews, and the Red Cross wanted to see this concentration camp. So what did the Nazis do but clean everybody out right into Auschwitz and brought in conductors, musicians, intellectuals, children, and showed this model camp. Of course, some of the inmates were SS soldiers, and if somebody said anything, they were in trouble. They also put up false fronts, stores. They put 4 people to a room. It was wonderful. They got away with it. This is the town of Terezin before World War II. And all they did was just put a fence around it and incarcerate as many as they could. The sad thing about this concentration camp, it was not an extermination camp. They brought the people in, they ran schools, symphonies, then put them in a truck and took them off to Auschwitz to be executed. And the big issue that Leo Baeck had was he find out in a minute why. He found out that they were going to their deaths and refused to tell them. The Zionists said he should have told them. He said, no, I don't want these women and children to, have fear going to their end. And to this day, he is not so famous because he did that. This is the front door of Theresienstadt. Arbeit macht frei, macht frei is German for work makes freedom. If you work really hard. This concentration,
what?
Work makes freedom. Okay. And here is the prisoners working there at Terezin. Terezin was not an extermination camp. Yet 33,000 people died there because of medical medical problems. But they then put them on a truck after this exhibition for the Red Cross. They loaded everybody on the truck, took them off to Auschwitz, and brought another load in. Because, and ironically, the host for the Danish and the Red Cross was Adolf Eichmann, who later became more famous when he got fired. He was not a nice person. This is the artwork from Theresienstadt camp. They to capture. Remember, these people were educated, artistic, and also very musical. You can see some of the art there. The Danish Jews were captured there and then in Denmark and brought here. But they bought this and thought, oh, everything is fine. This is great. Here are the children that they put in good clothing, they washed the clothing, and they were playing soccer, and they were playing ball, they were in a school. And the minute everybody left, they were put on a truck. They can see them playing soccer. This is a symphony. The Czech composer Raphael Schechter is among those held in the camp, and he conducted a chorus, 150 Jews, which had 16 performances of the complex Requiem by Giuseppe Verdi. And he was accompanied by a legless upright piano before the order gets over. The minute it was over, he was sent off to Auschwitz. This is an interesting man. This is Rudolf Verba. He's one of the very first men to escape from Auschwitz. Thea and I were there last, I guess, in the fall. They don't mention him. What he did actually, he and his friend found they worked in the laundry and stole regular clothing. Then they found out that the wood that was used for the barracks, the soldiers anyway, could be hollowed out. So they hid in the wood pile. They knew after 3 days that if they'd stop looking for them. So they got out, they found a lady who was very sympathetic, and they got all the way back to Hungary where they wanted to warn the Hungarian Jews there that they were going to be executed. They were ignored. However, they also got a message to Leo Baeck. Then they found out what was really happening. Now, Leo Baeck had been to England where he had taken 5,000 children with 4 of the Jewish people. They said, you're here in London, why don't you stay? Leo Baeck said, no, I want to be the last Jew alive in Germany. He went back. The other 4 were executed at Auschwitz, but they didn't know what to do with Leo Baeck in this situation. He was too well known, too honored. If they did anything to him, they thought they could be in real trouble. Now, Verba got some word in. His real name was Rosenberg, I think. Oh, I pushed the wrong button again. So I wrote this out. There was 4 other escapees, only because it's very difficult to sort out this information. Much of it has not been made public, for whatever reason anybody has. This is Auschwitz today. I took that picture last fall. Misty, spooky, not very much left. And I thought anyway that the guides who took you through were just spouting. They were not very knowledgeable. So anyway, and this is if you look across that field, the barracks were over there, the railroad. Then this was one of the reconstructed barracks. And you've got to figure the spot on a wooden plank. Over there is what's kind of left of the gas chambers. This is the entry gate, Arbeit. This is over here is where they executed the prisoners against that wall, for whatever reason. And then over there, that ruin is what's left of the gas chambers, which they really took down. Now, what was the escape that you could make? How could you avoid this? There was a lot of bargaining, black market, false stores to sell you immigration to Palestine. Palestine was created after World War One. Was called the British Mandate, and the British put this up, partitioned off part of the country for the Jewish population, which did not make the Arab population very happy. And they put troops in there. So this is 1918 on. Meanwhile, young Jan Baeck, you can see the boys going into Palestine. By 1939, there were 250,000, 250,000 Jewish people in Palestine. Well, what are they going to do? The Zionists did not like them because they weren't Jewish enough. The Arabs didn't want them there. Then the British Army was there. So they had a really tough time in the 1930s. Then, of course, later on it became Israel. And I think a lot of the trouble that we're seeing today goes back to that point. What would happen to come here is you would get an immigration pass, either legally or illegally. And there were 5 migrations out of Middle Europe, and many of them were phony. But these are all young men who had to be able to work on the farm and go to the kibbutz, wherever. They were brought in from the larger ships by Arab boatmen, who at first welcomed them. And then as things got on, they struck and they fought. More on that. Meanwhile, this is the puppeteer, my cousin Jan Baeck at this point. He later changed his name, you'll see. I never knew which one he was. PS 152 Manhattan, the year is 1950. That's our auditorium today. And I received these in the mail. They're sitting over there. From, I think, my cousin Jan, I'm not sure. We were studying puppetry in the old days when you learned by doing, the John Dewey method. And we were studying history through puppets. We had to go and write our own script, build a puppet theater, and my puppet was John Smith with polka. So these came in the mail, and as I got older, my mother kept them in the basement, and the mice got to them. They used to have clothing and a beard and hair and stuff. I have no paperwork that came with it, no letter, they just showed up. I think because the family cut up all relations with him, but I also think he had to make that agreement, cut off with his family to go to a kibbutz. Very much like a cult. This is, if you look in the upper picture, and use the word Tanta instead of aunt, that's Tanta Trudel. Tanta Kana, that's Tanta Magdalena, the mother of the puppeteer. Now, there were 7 children at that point in Oldenburg, and my great-grandfather came into Oldenburg to open a fish store, and the store is still there. It's a 3-story building with chickens in the back, and the girls worked in the store. 4 brothers, and 2 of them were killed in World War I. My grandfather in February, his brother in May. The other 2 beat it to America. Cousin Hans is in Arkansas. Don't tell me why. And cousin Julius died in the gutters of Hoboken. Anyway, she married a Jewish man. How did that happen? Well, he wasn't religious, and he was selling paper, and she's working in the fish store. What do you wrap fish in? And his father owned a paper company. His grandfather was a rabbi, and one of the brothers of Leo Baeck. So he's like the great-grandnephew of Rabbi himself. And they, at the start of the war, whenever they moved to Czechoslovakia, to Ostrava, where he was born, and his brother was born in 1916, I think the family's still there in Czechoslovakia. But with a name like Beck, good luck finding them. So anyway, we never heard from them. I have letters from all the other sisters and my grandfather's letters, which is in the book. And Uncle Willie was killed in Belgium, the grandfather in the Argonne forest, along with 120 men inside of and then my grandmother had got so bad in Germany that my grandmother married my step-grandfather, and they came through Ellis Island in 1922. But it really colored her life, made a mess. My great-grandfather, he lost all four boys, and one of the girls had a major stroke. And, never was the same again. Anyway, the British mandate of Palestine had just started, and cousin Jan, I think, joined a version of the Boy Scouts. I never knew that the Zionist or Jewish socialist youth connected to Lord Baden-Powell, the Boy Scouts. So it was kind of a connection, kind of an early Hitler youth, except Hitler banned it. And I think it was kind of a cult thing. They worked in the fields so they could go to Palestine and start a new life. So he's one, I think he was one of the last ones to come out of Czechoslovakia. For up until 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, I didn't know which one was which. Jan Baeck is on the right, and Wilhelm George or Georg stayed in Czechoslovakia, but I had no idea which one was which one was who. And then Thea said, "Well, look at the lips. That's got to be him." You know? So. And this is the kibbutz that as it is today. And there is cousin Jan, changed his name to Honzo David Ben Shalom. And they were supposed to cut all ties with their family, work in the fields, do carpentry, which he did. The story goes like this. He was working in the bakery, and he was all into this movement. And meanwhile, the kibbutz was under attack. They were attacked by the British Army in the 30s, and also by the Arab had a revolt there too. But he was in the bakery, and he had dough in his hand, and he started to play with the dough. Then he made a head, and he turned that head. Hey, what about puppets? Puppet head, because Czechoslovakia is the center of puppetry in Eastern Europe. There are puppet museums, puppet Hall of Fame. It's very, I guess, popular art form. If you think about it, other countries, the Japanese with Bunraku and the Bali with shadow puppets, he studied all of that. He had a university degree, and he came into this kibbutz and started to play. And he suggested, why don't we start a puppet theater for children? It was not well received. Because at this time, these people were fighting for their lives. 10,000 British troops came in and murdered 88 members of the kibbutz and wounded a whole bunch of others. And there's a memorial to them now. And at this kibbutz is Givat Haim, which is named after a martyr, a Jewish martyr. And in the course of the 1930s, he met his wife, Miss Ruth, and they started to make a puppet theater. Well, the puppet theater, he got an old panel truck, cut the side out of it, he had a rolling puppet theater. So after they survived the war into 1948, he was commissioned by UNESCO to tour all the displaced person camps with the puppet show, including those not only in Israel, those in Germany. So he went back into Germany. I think I have some pictures. He wrote this. It's in Hebrew, which I think is kind of with thank you, Google Translate, and it is in Hebrew. But it does say is that the children looking at puppets see the dolls. Adults see the strings. They like to have a theater, the door so small that children could get in free. But if the adults had a duck, they had to pay. These are his puppets, which right now are in a museum in Israel, which is going to close at the end of February, I understand. And toward the end of his life, he taught puppetry at the University of Tel Aviv. And he also had come to America at some point. He wrote this book, which is their Manual of Puppetry. And if anybody here has watched NCIS, anybody watch that? Yeah, well, The name of the agent is Ziva David. So is the name of that puppet. And she was the main character, Ziva David. I don't know if they're connected, but that Ziva, that's Honzo. He was known as Honzo because Honzo was Czech for Jan. So he kept his first name. And here are some of his puppets. There's always the cigarette in the back, which always kind of bothered me. But he had his wife doing costumes, his daughter doing lighting, and the children working on puppets. He was devoted to child education, peace for children. He wrote a play called Children of the World about diversity. That's in the 1940s. And then he also came to America. This is him working on the puppets, which he usually made out of paper mache. The instructions are in the book. And these are newspaper articles when he came to America. And he came here in the early 50s. He was written up in more papers than I can count. But he formed theater for the kibbutz, and it's 25 years in existence. But this color film I cannot find. He went out to Hollywood and made a movie called King Board. Good luck finding it. I've tried. The color movie is based on an original story by one of Israel's leading marionette artists, David Ben Shalom. The film is available, but look, Los Angeles. Good luck. So I am trying to find that. I've been to just about every site you can go to. So sure to see it. And this is the marionettes that he was put inside his theater there, I guess. These are more of his marionettes. You can see they're very varied in color and size and characters. And he created the marionette for the character. Now, this is the translation. The adults only see the strings. The children only see the dolls. If I were rich, I would set up a theater, 2 doors, small and large. But to anyone who will be able to pass through the small door without stooping, I would let in free of charge. For those who would pass through the big door, I would give them a choice. Pay 10 times as much or leave. And he gave this interview to the world in 1954 in this country. The irony is we never knew he was here. And one of the problems is I have letters from his aunts who saying how wonderful Hitler was. So I don't know. These are the children from the displaced children's camps. And what struck me is that everybody in here probably knows what a DP camp is, right? Maybe?
Displaced Persons camp.
Well, students don't, kids don't. Displaced Persons camp. What do you do with all these poor homeless people? You put them in a displaced camp by nationality. I don't know if there was a Greek one, but there certainly was Jewish, Polish, and so on. And UNESCO had him go from camp to camp. And these are children, and most of these children are orphans. Go from camp to camp with his puppet show called The Children of the World. And as a result of that tour, he ended up in an International Puppetry Hall of Fame. The most famous puppeteer you would know would be Jim Henson, who's also been that with the Muppets. And there's the truck with the stage. And I would like to show you at the end of this. Can we show that YouTube?
Sure.
I sent you the connection. I don't know.
Try it.
Try it right. That's Ziva David on NCIS. That's Ziva David. His Ziva David. His thing. Now, how do these two connect? Rabbi Leo Baeck believed that the Jewish people should not have revenge. He said, we leave revenge to God, and we need to not celebrate vengeance, but to go forward and help others. This other statement, which I thought was really interesting, the Zionists attacked him because he said, remember, Jesus is a Jew and the most important people who lived in our faith. and like that, just to be reserved for God. Vengeance is prohibited to man, and do not have revenge in your heart, only justice. The name Baeck is an abbreviation of the Hebrew Ben Kodesh, son of a pious man, a martyr. He was the end of a long line of rabbis going way, way back to the 1300s. And he was one of 11 children. So I don't know that he ever met his great, great grandnephew. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. This is Honzo's grave. He died in 1990. His wife is buried next to him in the kibbutz. I just thought the puppet on the grave. And if you could read the quote, he was 78 years old. His friend Yitzhak Mayer, I guess it is, eulogized him. When I stood before Honzo's fresh grave, I tried to think of, in my mind, what he would have asked for when leaving this world. No crying, no black mourning, but a circus show, and raising a glass of wine and singing the same song that was always sung by the table. Play a melody,